Yeah, what's up? Yeah, okay. How much do you want? Yeah, okay. You sure? Yeah. Just text me if you need it.
Oh, all right. My son had taken the microphone piece, and could not find it. Popped up. The Spotify app is kind of bad. Oh, wait. I just that. I was just. I don't even have that tab up anymore. Oh my gosh. I created another desktop on accident earlier. Okay, hold on. Okay. That is gnarly. Okay. Whoa, that's like my first experience using Windows different desktops. Okay. Alright, we're back. I could have sworn I had. Hold on. Kids are the worst. Be right back.
The spread operator is 3 periods. This operator allows expressions to be expanded in places where multiple arguments, elements, or variables are expected. I will also talk about the rest operator at the end of this video. The rest operator looks exactly like the spread operator. Here are some common use cases of the spread operator. You can add elements of an existing array into a new array. So here's the first array, certs to add, and we have 2 array certifications in here, algorithms and data structures and front-end libraries. And then also we have our main array, certifications, and we are going to add the certs to add into it. So responsive web design, and then right here is the spread operator, 3 dots and certs to add. Normally if you put certs to add here, it would add this complete array within the other array. But since we have the spread operator right here, it's going to just add the elements of the array into the new array. So now we're going to have a bunch of different elements, including the elements from the certs to add. And if we do console.log, we'll see that they're all strings in this array. There's no array within the array, and it just lists all these different certifications. Another use case is that you can pass elements of an array as arguments to a function. So let's look at this code right here. So we have this function, add 3 numbers, and there are 3 arguments, x, y, z, and then it's just going to add all of those numbers together and put it to the console. Now we have an array called args with 3 elements, 0, 1, 2. We're going to call the add 3 numbers function, but instead of passing 3 individual arguments like the function calls for, we are going to pass this array, but we're going to use the spread operator. That's going to spread out this array into the individual elements. So if we run that, it's going to put 3 here. It's going to add those numbers. Another thing to know is if there is a 4th element in this array and we run that, we're still going to get 3. It's actually going to ignore this 4th element in the array when it spreads it out because the function only calls for 3 items. Okay, the next thing is you can use it to copy arrays. So let me put in some code here. We're going to have the first array, 1, 2, 3, and now this is how you would just copy the array. You would put the spread operator and then the first array, and it's going to spread out the first array into the second array. And normally, if you didn't copy the array, when you push a new item onto array 2, it would also push on to array 1 if they were referencing the exact same thing. But in this example, we're going to show that we're pushing on another item onto the array, and when we console.log, you will see the arrays are different. ARR and ARR2 are now different because it did not push 4 onto the exact same array. They're completely different arrays. You can also use the spread operator to concatenate arrays, or just put 2 different arrays together. So we have the first array, 0, 1, 2, the second array, 3, 4, 5, and this is one way you could do it, the r1.concat our array 2. But with the spread operator, there's a new way to do it. We're going to say that r1 equals, we're going to spread out the array 1, and then we're going to spread out the array 2, and then that's going to create this is going to concatenate the array 1 and the array 2. And if I just comment this out, and you can say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The great thing about this is you can just actually add more elements while you're concatenating them. So let's just try that example really quick. And so you can concatenate and add more elements, and you can, if you want, you can put the second array at the beginning, the first array at the end, and it just gives a little more flexibility than just the concat function. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the rest operator. Like I said before, the rest operator looks exactly like the spread operator. It's just 3 dots. But it's basically the opposite of the spread operator. The spread operator spreads or expands an array into its elements. But the rest operator collects multiple elements and condenses into a single array element. Since it is an array, you can use array methods. Let me give you an example of that. So we have this function here, multiply. We're going to pass in 2 arguments, or is it more than 2? We're going to pass in multiplier, and then we're going to pass in an argument that has the rest operator right before the args. Since these 3 dots are being passed in as an argument into a function, that's how we know that it's being used as the rest operator and not the spread operator. So when we have the rest operator and then we have the name called the args, we can actually pass in as many arguments as we want into this function. So when we are passing in things into this function, the first number we pass in will be the multiplier, and then everything else we pass in will be condensed into an array called the args. And then look what we're going to do here. We're going to return the args.map. Since it is an array, you can use array methods like map. And we are going to map each element to this. We're going to return multiplier times the element. Basically, it's going to multiply each element in the args by the multiplier. So if we have var array equals multiply 2, 1, 2, 3, so that's the function. The first number 2 is the multiplier. Then 1, 2, 3 goes in as an array containing 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to map each of this 1, 2, 3 into this map function. We're going to multiply each item 1, 2, and 3 by the first thing that we passed in, which is the multiplier. So if we run that, you can see at the end 1, 2, and 3 have also all been multiplied by 2, so we get 2, 4, and 6. Thanks for watching. My name is Bo Carnes. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, use your code for good.
So you want to be a software engineer at Google? Go to algoexpert.io. Pick a question. Read.
This video is sponsored by Bug Replay, which requires writing them in a short, like the project videos where we build something from start to finish, and those are kind of the bread and butter videos of this channel. But today I want to do something different that may not be as fulfilling visually in the browser, but will really up your vanilla JavaScript game. So what I want to do is talk about some of the higher order array methods, as well as writing them in a shorter and more elegant way using ES6 arrow functions. So we'll be working with methods like map, filter, sort, reduce, and I'm sure a lot of you that are, I wouldn't say new to JavaScript, but a lot of you that don't really understand how these work have seen these quite a bit and are kind of confused by them. So hopefully this video can clear it up for you and you can see what they actually do. We're not going to do anything too advanced, but I will explain how they work. And
arrays are one of the most common things that you're going to use as a programmer. So today I'm going to be covering 8 JavaScript array methods that are going to make your life so much easier and more enjoyable. So make sure you stick around to the end. To get started, I just have an array of items that we're going to use for all of these different array methods. And the first method that we're going to talk about is the filter method. So let's assume that we want to get all of the items in this list that are less than or equal to $100 of price. All we would need to use is the filter method to filter out everything that's not under $100. So let's just say that we have here a variable which is going to be filtered items. We want to set that equal to items.filter, which is the filter method on the array. And this filter method just takes a single function, which is going to have one parameter of item, which is just each item inside of the array. And then we need to return a true or false statement on whether or not we want to include that in the new array. So we can just say return item.price is less than or equal to 100. This is saying all of the items that are less than $100 in price are going to be in our new filtered items array. And to test that, we can just console.log that filtered items array, and if you save that, you see we get an array over here of 4 items, all of them with a price less than or equal to $100. And that's perfect. This filtered array method is super easy to use. All you do is return true or false for each item, and if it's true, it's in the new array, and if it's false, it's not in the new array. And the great thing about this filter method and all of the other methods for arrays that we're going to be covering is that they actually don't change the underlying object that you're filtering over. So we can log the items array, and as you can see, this items array still has all of our different items, all 7 of them, while our filtered array has our 4 filtered items, so it got rid of the 3 expensive items over $100. And that's super convenient because we don't have to worry about changing the old array when we use these new array methods to create new arrays. So now let's cover the next array method, which is going to be map. And map allows you to take one array and convert it into a new array, so all of the items in the array are going to look slightly different. So let's just say we want to get the name of every item. So we can get an array of the item names by using map. So it looks very similar. All we do is change filter to map, and it takes a single parameter, which is a function with the item as well. And here we just return what we want in the new array. In our case, we just want the item.name. And now, if we print out these item names and we save, you see we get a new array that is just full of all the different names of the items. And if we wanted prices instead of names, all we would do is change this to price, and now we have an array of all of the different prices. This is super convenient when you want to take an object, for example, and just get the names or a single key, or take one array and convert it into another array. It has billions of different uses, and you'll find yourself using this all the time over, for example, a normal for loop or some other method to do this. Next, I'm going to talk about the find method, which allows you to find a single object in an array. So we'll just say we want our found item. We can do items.find. Again, it takes the exact same single function with item as the parameter. And all we do is we have a true or false statement in here, and it's going to return the item for the first one where it's true. So let's say we want to get the item with the name of book. So we can just say item.name equals book. And if we save that, we have to make sure we console.log the correct thing. And if you save that, you see that we get the item that has the name of book. We could do the same thing, for example, for the name of album. And now we get that actual album item. And this is just going to return the very first item that it finds in the array that returns true. Talk about is for each, which unlike these other methods does not actually return anything, so we no longer need this return statement here, and we don't actually need to log anything down here. So we can just say for each, and this is going to work very similarly to a for loop, but it's going to take a function here instead, and we have our first parameter in that function, which is item, just like before, and we can just print out the item.name. So for every single item, it's going to do what's inside of this function. And as you can see, we get all the different names of the different items being printed out. And we could print whatever we want. We could do price, for example, and it prints out the price, or anything else that you need to do for every single element inside of the array. This just makes working with arrays where you need to loop over them so much easier, since you don't have to write out the clunky long for loop syntax like you'd normally have.
When I found out that Google was doing career certificates and they had one in data analytics, I thought it seems like an easy choice.
Bit different than most of our other functions, since instead of returning a brand new array, it's actually going to return true or false. So we can check if some of the items in the list of items is less than 100. And if you give this for this items, that give every random for that. And the syntax for the reduce is just do a for loop and add the price every single time, and at the end of the for loop you would print out the price. But you can use the reduce method to do this instead. And the syntax for the reduce method is a bit different. Instead of taking an item, it takes an item and a property for what we want to reduce everything into. In our case, this is just going to be the the current total. So this is going to be the total after each iteration of the array. And then it also takes a second parameter, which is going to be your starting point. In our case, we want to start our total at 0. And then in here, all we do is return the price of the item, and we add it to whatever the current total is. And now, if we print out that total, you'll see that we get an error, and that's because this current total actually is going to be the first method in our parameter, and the second method is the actual item that we're going to be iterating over. And now if we save that, you'll see that we get the total to be 1840, which is the total if we add all these numbers together. And this method is a bit more confusing than the rest, so I'm going to break it down and explain it the best that I can. So, as we see here, we have the reduce method, which runs a function on every single item inside of our array. The first method of that function is going to be whatever the previous iteration of this array returned. And the second item is the actual item.
So you want to be a front-end engineer at Google? Go to frontendexpert.io. Pick a question. Great.
Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name's Kyle, and in today's video, we're going to take a look at one of the best features of ES6, which is object destructuring and array destructuring, as well as the spread operator. And these features are absolutely crucial if you want to develop using a front-end framework such as React, and even if you don't want to use it, they're incredibly useful for making your code so much cleaner and easier to work with. So without further ado, let's get started now. So to get started, I just have Visual Studio Code open, as well as the console output for all of the code that we're going to be writing. And to get started, I kind of want to explain what destructuring is. And the idea of destructuring is to take an object, or an array in this case, and convert it into smaller objects or smaller elements or smaller variables. So let's take a look at a very simple example. We're just going to take our alphabet array, and we want to get the very first two elements in that array. So normally, if you want to get the first element, you would do something like this. You would say alphabet of index 0, and that's going to give you the first element. So we can just log this out to make sure this is working, console.log A. And as you can see over here, it's logging out A. Let's just zoom that in actually. There we go. It's logging out A. And for the second element, we would do the exact same thing, just like this, and we would log B. And you can see that's working properly, but this is kind of clunky to do, and there's a much easier way to do this by using destructuring. So let's comment out this way of doing old things, and let's actually come in here, and we know that we want to get the elements A and B. So we can just say we want to get A, and we want to get B. And we're just going to set that equal to here alphabet, and if we save, you see we get the same output, A and B. But how exactly does this work? So the idea of destructuring is that what you want to do is you take the element you want to destructure, and you put that on the right side of the equal sign. Essentially you're saying destructure this alphabet array. And what we want to do is, since we have an array, we put our parentheses over here, our array brackets, around the elements that we wanted to supply. So we have our variable names A and B that we want to actually get out of this array, and we put those inside of those brackets so that we know we're taking this array apart and putting it into these constants A and B. And then the position of these elements is where they're going to get pulled out. So A is the first element inside of this array, so it's going to get the first element. B is the second element, so it's going to get the second element here, and so on. So you can see we get the first and second element, and we just need to put a third element in here, for example C, and this is going to give us the third element. And if we save that, you see we get C over here. But what if we wanted to skip B, for example? What if we only wanted A and C? Well, we can just remove B, leave in this comma, and this is going to say skip the second element. So if we save that, you see we just get A and C, and that's working perfectly fine. But what if we want to get the rest of the elements inside of the alphabet? That's where the idea of the spread operator comes in. So we can just come over here, put 3 dots, and whatever you want to call the rest of alphabet. We're just going to call it rest, and let's log that out. So console.log of rest. Now if we save that, you see that our first element A goes into the variable A, we skip the second element, and then the third element C goes into this variable C, as you can see A and C, and then everything else, all of the rest of our array, D, E, and F, they all go into this rest variable, which gets printed out over here on the right side of the screen, as you can see D, E, F. Another really powerful thing with destructuring and the spread operator is you can use it to combine 2 arrays together. So for example, we can come down here and we can just say we want to create a new array, and this new array is going to be our alphabet array and our numbers array combined together. So we know that we want this to be an array, and we want to get all of the elements inside of alphabet. So we can just say ... alphabet, and this is going to spread all of the alphabet letters all across here inside of the array. And then after that, we want to do the same exact thing, but for numbers. So what this is going to do is it's going to put all the alphabet elements here, and then all the numbers afterwards. And we can come in here and we can print that out. So we can just say print new array. And if we save that, you see we get all of the alphabet, and then all of the numbers afterwards. Now granted, this isn't entirely that useful for arrays, because we can do the same exact thing by saying alphabet.concat, and then we pass in numbers. That's going to give us, as you can see, the exact same output over here. But when we move into objects, this syntax will become incredibly useful for combining 2 different objects together. Another place that the array version of this is incredibly useful is when you're dealing with functions and returning more than one parameter from a function. So let's create a function down here, and this function is just going to be called sum and multiply. Multiply. And what this is going to do, it's going to take 2 numbers, A and B, and it's just going to sum them together and multiply them together and return both of those in an array. So where we're going to return here A plus B, and we're also going to return A times B. So now when we call this function, we're going to be getting an array. So let's do that real quick. We'll say sum and multiply. We'll just say 2 and 3. And we're just going to set this to a value. So we'll say const array is going to be equal to that. And then we'll just console.log out that array. And let's remove all the other code since we don't actually need that right now. And if we save that, you see we get our sum as the first number, 2 plus 3 is 5, and we get the multiplication, 2 times 3, as our second number in that array. But we can use that array destructuring to just come in here and say we want the sum right here, it's the first element, and we know that the multiplication here is going to be the second element, so we can just say we want to destructure the return from this as 2 different variables, one sum and one multiply. And now we can come in here, we can log out sum, and we can log out multiply, and over here we get sum as 5 and multiply as 6. Something else that's really handy that we can do with over here we get sum structuring is we can actually set default values. So let's say in here that this also maybe could return a division. And by default we just want to set the division to maybe say no division. Okay, so by default this will say no division, but if we pass it a division, it'll actually set to that division. And we can come in here, log out division, and you can see it says no division because this sum and multiply is only returning 2 properties. But if we came in here and set another property, a divided by b, and we run this, you'll see that now division is actually being populated with that third parameter that's being sent out. But when that's not there, it gets populated to the default value which we set inside of our being sent out. If we run this, you'll see that now division is actually being populated with that third parameter that's being sent out. But when that's not there, it gets populated to the default value which we set inside of our destructure. And the power of destructuring is really not that apparent in arrays. It's still really useful to be able to destructure in arrays, and like you can see here, there's many use cases for it, especially in functions. But the real power of destructuring comes with objects, so let's jump over and look at object destructuring. So here we are with 2 basic objects. We have person1 and person2, and they have the properties of name, age, and address, and that address has the properties of city and state. And now when we want to actually destructure an object, it's going to work very similarly to an array. So let's just go down here and we can just say that we want to get maybe the name of the person and we want to get their age. So since we're destructuring an object, we use curly braces instead of square brackets, and we just say what we want to get. We want to get the name property and we want to get the age property, and we want to get them from person2, for example. So we'll say person2, and we're going to console.log out our name, and we're going to do the same exact thing for the age. And if you say that, we see we get the name Sally and the age 32. This works exactly the same as the array destructuring, but instead of it being based on position, it's actually based on the name of the key. So for example, name here is set to name up here, and age, they need to match. But what if you want to use a different name? What if you want to set this variable here to be first name instead? All you would do is put the actual name inside of the object you're destructuring, in our case name, and then after that you put a colon, and then the actual variable name you want. So for our example, we want this to be first name, and then we can come down here and we can print out first name. And if we save that, you see we get the same exact output. And what this is doing is it's taking the name property from the person and it's mapping that to this first name variable that we're creating. And we can even still use default values inside of here. For example, let's say that we want to get something else this person doesn't already have. Let's say we want to get favorite food. And by default, we just want this to be, we'll just say rice. And we can come here, we can log out favorite food, and you can see by default it is rice. But if we set the favorite food, for example, we'll just say their favorite food is watermelon, put a comma here, you'll now see that watermelon's being outputted. We can do the same thing for first name. We can default the first name here to John, and if this person has no first name and we save, you'll see that this first name gets set to John, but when they do have a first name, you'll see that it becomes Sally, which is their actual first name. Also, just like with the array deconstructuring, we can do the spread operator as well. So let's go all the way back here to where we just have name, and we can just put ... and any variable name you want. For example, we'll call this rest, and this is going to be the rest of our object. So if we save this, you'll see that we'll get everything else inside of that object except for the name, which we already took out. So we'll have the address here, the age, as well as the favorite food. But since we took name out here in the destructuring, name does not show up in that rest object. Also, something that's really nice about destructuring objects is you can actually destructure nested objects. For example, address. We can come in here and we can just say that we want to get the street. So we'll say address, and inside of that address, what we want to do is we want to get the street. So what we do is we put the key here, address, which matches the address key inside of the object, and then we put it again, the curly braces, saying that we just want to destructure this new object, and we just want to get the street. So in here, we can print out street, and if we save that, you see how we're getting undefined, and that's because there is no street property in address. So let's, for example, get city instead. Now we can save that, and make sure we change our variable name down here, and you can see that we're getting our city, which is somewhere else, just like it is inside of the object here. And again, we can do default values. Essentially, this works exactly the same. We're just nesting our object deconstruction inside of another object deconstruction. Another thing we can do is actually combine two different objects. So let's take our two objects here and let's remove the name and the address from person number 2. And we're going to combine person number 1 and person number 2, and everything in person number 2 will overwrite what's in person number 1. So an easy way to do that is we can just come down here, we're going to say that we want this to be person 3, and person 3 is going to be equal, we need to put it inside of our curly brackets here because we're doing destructuring, and we're just going to get all of the rest of person 1 and all of the rest of person 2. And what this is going to say is it's going to say take everything inside of person 1 and put it in the object, and then take everything in person 2 and also put it in the same object, but overwrite anything that was already in person 1. And we can print out person 3 down here, and as you can see, we get the name of Kyle, which is up here, the name in person 1. We get the age of 32, because this gets overridden from person 2. Same with favorite food watermelon, that gets added by person 2. And then the address here is the same exact address as person 1 up above, because person 2 doesn't have an address. And this ability to combine two objects together like this is very prevalent in frameworks such as React, and even just in normal JavaScript. Another thing that I think is the most important and useful part of object deconstructuring is the ability to use it inside of functions inside of the arguments. So let's come down here and create a function, and this function is just going to be called print_user. And this is going to take in a user, and all this is going to do is we're just going to console log user. So now if we save that and we actually call this function, so we say print user and we pass it in person 1, you can see it prints out the object for that user. But what if we only really want to get the name and the age of the user inside of this print user function? For example, what if we wanted to print something like this? We could say name is, and then we could print out the name, just like this, user.name. And then we could say also age is, and we can print out the user's age by just saying user.age. Just like this. Now if we say that user's name is Kyle and age is 24. But since we only are using the name and the age, inside of this arguments, we can just actually use destructuring. We can say here that all we want to do is we're going to take in an object. That's what these curly braces are saying. We're taking an object, and all we want is the name and the age property of that object. And now we can come down here. We don't actually need this user anymore. We just say name and age. And when we save that, you see we get the exact same output over here because we're passing in person 1. And it's destructuring that and saying all we want is the name and the age. We can also set default. For example, we can come in here and say favorite food, and we can set that to a default again of watermelon. And then when we come down here, we can also print out that. So we can just say right here, we can say, whoops, food is, and we just want to print out the favorite food. And now when we save that, you see it says food is watermelon. But of course, if we come over here and we put a favorite food, for example, rice, and we save it again, you see over here, it now says food is rice. This right here is the single most useful part of object destructuring in my opinion, and I use this by far the most, especially when working with languages like React, because React very heavily uses object destructuring inside of its function calls. And speaking of React, I'm currently working on a React course right now, so if you're interested in learning... Hello everybody,